Crash issue 32 was the September 1986 issue. This cover picture was apparently the one that Oliver Frey had looked forward to doing the most, being a fan of the original Dan Dare comic strip. This cover is in the comic strip style and could almost be an advert for the game itself, reviewed in this month's issue. Let's find out how well this game, and others, did. It's a slow start this month. In 10th place with 66% is Mermaid Madness from Electric Dreams. In this game you play Myrtle the Mermaid and have to dive underwater, avoiding fish and other hazards to rescue Gormless Gordon. Crash praised the witty, jolly and informative instructions, although they found it a pity that the game wasn't as good. They described the graphics as big and the colour as over-extravagant, resulting in an attribute clash. Two reviewers found the game fun to play, although another described it as slow and boring. Generally a poorly finished game that they did not recommend. By this point in the Spectrum's life, this just seems a bit basic. I could understand if it had been released as a competitor to Scuba Dive back in issue 2, but this is 30 months later, and to be frank, Scuba Dive still plays better. Your protagonist in this one is a lot larger, which makes it easy to bump into the enemies and lose your one life. Sometimes your mermaid gets stuck on a rock as you enter a new screen, which just causes the screen to flick back and forth. The game is fairly unforgiving and ultimately not one with enough polish or special features to want to come back to. In 9th place with 69% is 2Jad from Ariolasoft. In this game you play a combat droid called Gen 19, and your mission is to explore a control complex, fighting off security droids and finding pieces of a circuit board to fix the control computer 2Jad. Crash described this game as quite attractive at first, but there wasn't much to it after a few games. They found the graphics and animation up to scratch, but the whole quality of sprites to lack polish. They didn't find it particularly addictive, generally boring and too easy, and a game with a lack of originality to it. On the whole they found it playable, not a bad game, but nothing spectacular. This game is certainly better than Mermaid Madness, but falls a little short of being really good. The screen layouts and aliens you encounter are colourful. It's just a shame there's so little animation on your character, making it feel very rigid as you move around the screens. The problem with this game mainly is it's too late to the party. Had it been released a year or so before, it may have been more worthwhile. Games like Equinox from issue 30 really showed how this type of game could be done, and sadly 2Jad falls short. Maybe worth a play, but there are far better games of this genre available. In 8th place with 75% is Mission Omega from Mind Games. This is an arcade strategy game played in real time over 1 hour. You play the captain of a mining vessel and have to infiltrate a moon-sized vessel heading towards Earth. You do this by constructing robots and sending them to explore the vessel. These robots have to find keys to access reactors and deactivate them. Sean Masterson, reviewing this game in the Frontline column of Crash, described this as an interesting, difficult, but colourful and enjoyable hybrid game that should appeal equally to strategy and arcade fans. Whilst not being the best of its kind, he found it addictive enough that he wouldn't give up until it's completed. However, he did criticise the instruction inlay as being a total waste of time, and felt that the price tag of £9.95 was a bit steep. Nevertheless, he felt the game was worth taking a closer look at. It's another original idea this, and though a slow-paced game that might not appeal to arcade fans, this may be more worthwhile if planning, exploration and trying different approaches is your thing. Although the menu-based system works pretty well for making selections, putting together the pieces of your robot and making the decisions as to when to launch, it's a great shame that the presentation is so basic. Using the Spectrum's default character set by this point in the Spectrum's life was a no-no, and does just make the game look dated. Certainly worth a look, but I can't see that this would appeal to everyone. In 7th place with 79% is Mandragore from French software house Infogrames. This is a graphical adventure role-playing game heavily based on Dungeons & Dragons, with you controlling a party of characters, exploring a landscape, visiting various chateaux, and ultimately freeing the country from the clutches of an evil tyrant. The game consists of one main game but 10 chateaux loaded one at a time from tape. Crash found that the overly involved instructions made the game confusing to start with. This, combined with characters that sometimes blended into the background and a messy game ending, meant that this appeared to be a game that annoys and perplexes rather than engages and entertains. They described this as an adventure which clearly has had a lot of hard work put into its inception, with a depth and complexity well beyond a normal computer game. They felt the game had a great deal to offer, and that those interested in role-playing games should certainly take the time to get to know this one. It's another early role-playing variant, taking me back in feel to pre-Crash games like Cornell's Black Crystal. The graphics aren't great, being a bit too blocky and garish. It's got a nice combination of allowing text input with some commands like directions understood with a single key press. Although similar to something like Master of Magic from last issue, this game is not quite up to the quality of that. There's a lot of multi-loading which I guess helps maximise the breadth of the game. Maybe worth a go if you like RPGs. In 6th place with 81% comes Ace from Cascade. In this game you pilot an AWAT combat aircraft and have to defend the southern coast of your homeland against the invading forces. Crash described this as possibly the Spectrum's best flight simulator. One reviewer found the scenario somewhat unrealistic, with you as the only fighter pilot, but nevertheless found the game responsive with smooth and attractive graphics. The other reviewers were not quite so positive, one describing it as a good try but without enough to keep it interesting. The other found this no different to many previous flight simulators, except you only need 20 keys to play it. On the whole they felt it to be initially fun, but not a game with much long-term point to it. It's another fighter pilot flight simulation type of game, of the sort that regularly came out throughout the Spectrum's life. This one is uninspiring as they all tend to be. There's the odd rock on the landscape, but other than that it's plain green and not much to look at. There's not a great deal of atmosphere or excitement to the game, and frankly I don't think it's worth spending any time on. In 5th place with 82% is The Very Big Cave Adventure, written by St. Brides and published by CRL. This is a spoof of the original Colossal Cave text adventure. Crash felt this game was a shade on the expensive side, even though it was a 2-part game. They liked the witty and chatty style of the game. On the whole they described it as not only a super spoof, but a polished and well-orchestrated adventure in its own right. CRL knew they were onto a good thing with the Delta Force style of spoof adventures, and this game taps squarely into that mould. Although somewhat based on Colossal Cave, the game is chock full of puns, most of which are pretty cringeworthy. I played this game back in the day and found it had a slow start, although it got better in the latter half of the adventure. Falling slightly short of what Delta 4 managed to achieve, nevertheless this is a bit of fun for a few hours play, and if you like spoof text adventures you should give it a go. In 4th place we leap up to 89% with Stainless Steel from Microgen. In this game you play teenage superhero Ricky Steele. Your mission is to save the world from the evil Dr. Vardas, first on foot, and then later in your combat vehicle Nightwind. One Crash reviewer felt this game was well worth a smash, although it just missed out on getting one. They found the first few levels hard, but more playable once you work out a method. They described it as graphically excellent with brilliant scrolling, a game that's very simple but very addictive. One niggle was that your character is sent back to the beginning of the level when you die. They concluded by describing this as a slick shoot 'em up without too much depth. This game certainly sets the standard in terms of presentation. The loading screen is superlative, and this moves on to a dynamic and exciting title screen. Even the game itself has superbly smooth animation, and although mostly monochrome, has detailed graphics. The only snag seems to be the game itself. Not a great deal to it, especially in the first level. You walk down a road avoiding helicopters and occasionally collecting fuel. Hit something and you're back to the start. I hope that later levels improve, otherwise I can't see this having much lasting appeal, but still it's a game that's worth taking a look at least once. In 3rd place, a crash smash with 90% is The Boggit, written by Delta Force Software and released by CRL. This is a spoof of the J.R.R. Tolkien book The Hobbit, and the ZX Spectrum game of the same name. It was a follow-up, although a prequel in story terms, to Lord of the Rings, with a similar sense of humour. Crash said that although they'd enjoyed Delta 4's earlier games, Lord of the Rings from issue 18 and Robin of Sherlock from issue 25, they weren't sure the jokes were universally funny. However, with this game they felt the comic genius of the main author Fergus MacNeill had been more profitably directed to the theme of the game. They found the game reads well, plays well, and the presentation is slick and polished to a T. Crash really didn't sell this game well in their review, they even put a screenshot from a totally different game. I rushed out and bought this game solely from the reviewing Sinclair user, which did a much better job in selling it. This is a really good follow-up to Lord of the Rings. Using the Quill with its patch extension allows graphics and text on screen at the same time. The humour has taken a step up as well, not just the schoolboy humour of the original game, but clever parodies of the original Hobbit computer game, and some fantastically witty set pieces, many of which may not make sense today without the cultural context of the 1980s. The game is expansive, covering 3 parts, each of which are loaded separately. If you like spoof text adventures and Tolkien, I would highly recommend. In 2nd place with 92% on a crash smash is this month's cover feature, Dan Dare from Virgin. This game is based on the popular comic strip character Dan Dare. The plot of this game sounds somewhat similar to 8th place game Mission Omega, with the Mekon sending an asteroid hurtling towards the Earth to destroy it. You play Dan and have to infiltrate the asteroid and stop it. One Crash reviewer said this game defies all adjectives and is one of the best on the Spectrum. They found the graphics so amazing they had to check it was actually a Spectrum producing them. 2 of the reviewers found it playable, addictive and well worth your time. However, another reviewer wasn't as sold on it, finding the game unoriginal, the sound disappointing, and not being convinced they'd still be playing it in a couple of weeks. I'd heard of the comic book character and I'd heard of the game, but I'd never played it until now. This is yet another treat that I missed out in the heyday of the Spectrum. The game just plays so well, everything comes together, graphics, sound, playability, and the nice touches of the comic strip captions when something happens to Dan. In many ways quite a straightforward game, but needing to conserve your weapon takes skill. The fact that this is against the clock rather than using lives is fairly unusual, and the game never feels frustrating. It took me a bit of time to work out going up and down the lifts, but this is a game I wish I'd played before and would thoroughly recommend. Finally, in 1st place, a crash smash with 93%, is another Dan game. This one is Dynamite Dan 2 from Mirrorsoft. Subtitled Dr. Blitzen and the Islands of Arcanum, this pits you once again against Dr. Blitzen, the antagonist of the first Dynamite Dan. In this game you set up base on a group of 8 islands. Dan has to visit these islands, find a record and jukebox on each, and use these to get the 8 parts of a password to Dr. Blitzen's record pressing plant. One reviewer hated Dynamite Dan but was pleasantly surprised by the sequel. They praised the brilliant sound effects and tunettes throughout the game, and found it surprisingly easy to play, which spurs you on. Another reviewer described it as one of the most polished arcade adventures around, with neatly drawn graphics and minimal colour clash. On the whole, an addictive and playable game, a great follow-up and superb value for money. This is definitely a worthy follow-up to the original Dynamite Dan. Although not feeling quite as tough as that game, it's got a very similar feel to it, with colourful graphics, smooth animations, spot effects and little tunes throughout the game. One quirk is the control keys. I can't quite work out whether the keys can move you down on the top row, whereas those go up or jump on the bottom row. Nevertheless, this is a fun little platform game that's definitely worth playing. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro computing from Norlogic Retro.